Calibration is the only way we can ensure color consistency throughout our entire workflow. And when I say entire workflow, I'm talking about capture, edit, and output. Again, the entire workflow consists of correct color at capture, correct color on your monitor during your editing process, and correct color during output, whether that is web, your phone, or print. First, we're going to talk about correct color on our monitor and why this is crucial for our workflow. When you have a non-color workflow, you're going to face a number of problems. Some of those problems include inaccurate colors, colors that don't match across devices and prints, and a huge waste of time and money. Have you ever had a print that came out too dark or too yellow? Or have you ever looked at your image on someone else's monitor and noticed that the colors were way off? The first thing I would do was make sure that the monitors are completely calibrated to industry standard. You don't want to tone on an improperly calibrated monitor because you're moving the image and the colors in the wrong direction. You're wasting time and money by having to re-edit and continue to print images until you get appropriate colors. So let's talk about how to fix all that. So why do I need a color workflow? If you're using multiple monitors, they need to match. Say you're working on your laptop and an external monitor. Well, we need to bring them as close as possible so that they're representing colors properly and accurately, so you could switch between the two and be confident that the colors are the same. Monitors need to match your lab or output. If you're sending your photos out to print, for instance, you need to make sure that your monitor matches your lab's monitor. If you're using a good printing lab, they're calibrating their devices to industry standards, so you want to calibrate yours to the same industry standard. So that you know when you send them a file, they're going to see the colors the same exact way and print an appropriate image. If you're sending your photos out to a client and they're calibrated and you're not, then your photos are going to look drastically different. That could lose you money, can lose you a client, and waste a lot of time. We're going to have a little bit of fun here and talk about some monitor myths. The first big myth I hear all the time is, if I buy a good monitor, the color will be right. That's not true. Monitors often come out of the box bright, high contrast, and cool. That doesn't mean that they're not a good monitor. It just means that most people use external monitors for cruising the internet and watching movies. And typically the eye is drawn to bright images that have high contrast and are cool. And what do I mean by cool? I mean blue. So the color palette is often pulled more towards the blue spectrum. So let's take a look at some examples. The first one is brightness. Now if my monitor is too bright, I will tend to pull that image down, the exposure down a little bit, because it'll look way too bright to my eyes. So I finally get the image to a good, beautiful spot. But really I've overcorrected. So the output of my image will be muddy and underexposed. The same goes for contrast. If the contrast is really turned up in the monitor, I might dial back the contrast of a photo to make it look really good to my eye visually, but then when I print it, the image looks flat and dull. And finally, one of the worst ones to my eye is color temperature. Now remember how I said that monitors are often blue? Well, if I pull some of that blue out and I'm trying to make it a more balanced photo to my eye on my monitor, the image is going to come out yellow and look like a totally different time of day and maybe a little muddy. The next myth we face, I could set my monitor's color by eye. Now, I know we all have good eyes because we're photographers, but we're highly influenced by surrounding colors and temperatures and tones. So it's impossible for us to set the color of our monitor by our eye. Let's pop into Photoshop and see an example. Alright, here we are in Photoshop. You can see that I made another gradient and two circles. Right off the bat, you can see how the circles look completely different in tone. The one on the right looks a little darker than the one on the left. But in reality, the tones are exactly the same. If I move my circle over to the left and line it up, you can see that they're exactly the same tones. Our eyes are heavily influenced by the surrounding colors and tones. You could even see it as I move that circle around. Across the gradient, it appears to be changing colors, but we all know that that's not happening. This is why a lot of big editing houses have all their walls painted to a neutral gray, so that the editors are not influenced by the surrounding colors. Pretty cool, huh? Back in our presentation, you could see how hue really affects surrounding colors. These two blues look completely different. The one on the left looks a little darker than the one on the right. But if we strip away part of that yellow band and match up those two blues, you could see that the blue is exactly the same. It's pretty incredible how our eyes so drastically affected by the surrounding colors. So to recap, why can't you calibrate your monitor just using your eye? Well, first, our eyes are easily influenced by surrounding colors. Like I said, a lot of editing houses will block out the windows and paint the walls a neutral gray. If you can't do that, one good tip is to take the background monitor of your computer and make that neutral gray. Don't have a really bright photo in the background because that will affect how you perceive color. Our ability to judge color changes throughout the day. In the morning, you'll see color a lot differently than you will at night. Our physical state affects how we see color. If you've had a lot of coffee, you might perceive color a little different than if you were drinking decaf that day. Color vision deficiency. This happens more in men than women, but it's when our eyes can't perceive certain color channels. There's really simple tests online and at your doctor's office to see if you're suffering from this. And finally, age. I'm really sorry, but as we get older, the way we perceive color and the amount of colors we can see changes. So what are the benefits of having a color workflow? Well, first of all, you get consistent images. Every time you tone an image, you can be confident that the colors you're seeing on your monitor are exactly what you're going to get on output. You're bringing your monitor to industry standards, so if you send your photo out to print, you know that the lab is going to see the color exactly the way you did. And finally, it's going to save you a ton of time and money. No longer will you have to reprint an image and retone an image to get it to match your monitor. I hope this module answered all your questions as to why you should be working in a calibrated color workflow. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into color theory and color sciences to get a better grasp at all the tools inside color management. See you soon.